It's Wednesday, August 31st, 2022. Hello and welcome to a live edition of the Carolina Weather Group. I'm James Brierton in Charlotte. We have Frank Strait in Columbia and Scotty Powell in Morganton, North Carolina. We are live on this Wednesday night, so if you're joining us right now on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, or Twitter, we want to hear from you. Join the conversation, and we'll start by saying hello to Sebastian. We are once again counting down until the launch of Artemis. It's deja vu all over again for NASA's return to the moon and beyond. The mission, as you saw live on the Carolina Weather Group YouTube channel on Monday, was scrubbed due to a variety of reasons, including an engine pressurization problem and weather. And now we're looking ahead to a launch window, the second launch attempt on Saturday at 2:17 p.m. Eastern time. And gentlemen, I don't know about you, but I've been to Florida on a Saturday at 2:17 p.m. Eastern time, and it doesn't always look well when you're looking up at the sky.
I was just in Florida. Yeah, I was in Florida last week, and I can tell you about 2:00. About when those thunderstorms pop up, so I'm not too confident that this is going to happen Saturday, but we'll see.
Yeah, for a second, James, I thought you said, "Well, I've been to the moon."
No, I've not been to the. Well, Florida's kind of like the moon.
Space Mountain,
depending on which side you're on, it's either way hotter or way colder.
Yeah,
but there's no humidity.
We're going to be watching very closely on Saturday those afternoon pop-up showers and thunderstorms. There's a whole magnitude, right, of launch criteria. We'll maybe pull those up on the screen here in a moment. The NASA launch criteria for rocket launches from Kennedy Space Center there in the Cape Canaveral. But of course, lightning is a big no. Have you guys seen some of these really cool photos, and probably scary if you're an engineer, of lightning striking very close to Artemis? Because it's been out on the launch pad now for over a week. NASA's put out some of these pictures. We'll pop them up on your screen if you're watching with us. But, they've got at least those three big lightning rods on towers around Launch Complex 39B there. And just look at the way it draws in the lightning. I mean, obviously it's protective, right? So they're trying to deflect away from their rocket. But absolutely incredible. And I think they did say that a couple of the lightning strikes came real close to the rocket. This was before Monday's launch attempt, but everything looked okay in terms of these lightning strikes. But I'm fearful that we might see more of these on Saturday before, as the animation shows here, we can get this SLS, this brand new SLS rocket, the biggest ever built, the most powerful ever built, launched into space. If you've made it this far into the podcast, you probably already know a lot about Artemis, but just as a brief recap, this is an uncrewed. There are no humans on this moonshot mission around the moon that will last somewhere between 30 or 40 some odd days. They're going to be testing not only the technology to get humans, including the first woman and the first person of color, onto the moon by the year 2024, but they're also going to be testing whether this technology and the radiation beyond the moon is safe. So they've got mannequins or crash test dummies that are going to be in the new Orion spacecraft. I love these animations. And Frank, let me start with you, because they bring me back. I remember where I was for that last space shuttle mission. There's so many memories of Apollo built into some of these designs. What do you think about, Frank, when you look at Artemis?
Being a little older than you, James, I remember where
I was trying not to say that
space shuttle
but
mission.
you said it for me.
I remember where I was for the first space shuttle mission, and that's what it takes me back to is watching the first space shuttle lift off back in the early 80s. If I remember right, it happened on a Sunday morning. That was after they had to scrub the first space shuttle mission a few times too for various reasons. So it was great to see it finally go, and I let out a cheer, which made my mom mad because she was trying to sleep.
What time was it?
If I remember right, it was like 8:30 in the morning. She always slept on Sundays.
A little like Monday's launch window. These next few launch windows are later on in the day, hence the thunderstorm threat. But I'm kind of glad I haven't had to get up. I was going to say at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I think if it was at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd just stay up. For Monday's launch attempt, I got up at 5 a.m. So I do like the afternoon ones longer. But Scotty, you just came back from Florida. You were watching Daytona over the weekend, their NASCAR running, and you saw these exact storms. Walk us through a little bit. I know Shay's not here. Could you play Shay Gibson for us? What kicks off these infamous coastal beach thunderstorms that most people who've probably never launched a rocket have at least been to the beach and have been running for cover from the shoreline?
Yeah, definitely. It's the sea breeze, and basically what happens is the land obviously heats quicker than the ocean. So as that happens, it kind of causes this little boundary that blows in from the cooler ocean into the land, and as that boundary blows in, that moisture hits warm air, causes rise with thunderstorms. And normally this time of the year, there's not really any steering currents. And I was in Florida last week, and what would happen is these storms would kind of just develop as the moisture blows in off the ocean over the land, and they just kind of sit there. They meander. One storm will collapse, kind of like here in the Carolinas where we see those outflow boundaries. One collapses and another one pops back up, anywhere 2, 3, 4, 5 miles away. And it's just a continuing cycle until we really start to run out of daylight heating and that heat and instability. So that's the concern. These things normally start off, early afternoon after lunch, about 1, 2 o'clock, you start to see the clouds develop and the showers and thunderstorms, and they can last a long time, especially in Florida with no steering currents. There's really nothing to kind of push that storm out of the area. So it kind of has to rain itself out. So that's the concern with the launch at 2:17. The concern is we could see storms, and just like not necessarily a storm at the particular launch site, but like James was showing you earlier, you have to worry about lightning, and we know lightning can strike outside of these storms 10, 15 miles away. So necessarily may not be a storm there at Cape Canaveral. There could be one 10, 15 miles away that's producing a lot of lightning that would also delay this launch. So we were actually talking in our pre-show meeting there on the phone, James, and we was like, "Wow, you would think that we would know better than shooting a rocket off in the summertime in the mid-afternoon." But it has a lot to deal with orbits and things like that. So hopefully we'll keep our fingers crossed that this will be a successful launch. But, weather tells us that it may not happen just because of the environment of where this is taking place. Now, if this was maybe up in Michigan or Maine or something like that, where it's not as hot and not as unstable, you could get a better chance. But with it being in Florida in September, it's pretty good chance that you can bet on showers and thunderstorms developing in the afternoon.
Yes, but you'd have to worry about the clouds and the temperatures.
That's right. Yeah.
And the fog if you're in the other places. And as we're watching the animation play out, we're reminded it's not just about the moment of launch, or in this case, the moment of landing. All of this is happening on an angle. So it's not just the weather straight above Cape Canaveral. It's the weather out east over the Atlantic, which will be contingent on whether or not they can not only get off the pad, but safely get off the planet and into orbit. And it is that time of year, folks, whether you like it or not, where the tropics are about to come back with vengeance. Frank has been watching as we near this peak of hurricane season historically there in early September. And Frank, it looks like right on cue, the game is afoot.
Yes, it certainly is. We've had a long stretch of quiet weather here. Nothing's happened since Tropical Storm Colin formed almost right over Myrtle Beach back in early July. It looks as though we're going to end up going 2 straight months without a development, although we do have 3 amigos out there in the Atlantic that we're keeping an eye on right now, and the National Hurricane Center has 2 code red areas out there on them, and for us here in the Southeast, only one of them I think is a real worry. I'll talk about the 2 that aren't worries first, starting with this one up here. That's over the northern part of the North Atlantic. We'll switch over to the satellite. And this is it up here. You can see, if you look closely, there's a little bit of a swirl in the low levels. You don't see it as well in the bright clouds, which are the thunderstorms largely on the south and east side of that system. But there is a well-defined area of low pressure there, and the waters are warm enough. It's sort of over the Gulf Stream there. So that's an area to watch for development, and the National Hurricane Center thus has painted that red X on it. The other area of concern is over the eastern Atlantic, out by Cabo Verde. There's a tropical wave, very high amplitude tropical wave. By that I mean it's really tall. It goes almost all the way to 30 degrees north latitude here. So this is something to keep an eye on. There's a broad turning here. There's some thunderstorms associated with it, even though it's in a rather dry environment. So this is something we'll keep an eye on, but because it's already so far north, it's probably going to end up wandering around the Atlantic and be a concern only for marine interests out there. Now, the other X, the one that's down here, is one that we are going to have to keep a closer watch on. Robust tropical wave is here. It's roughly along 53 degrees west longitude right now, and it's been very slowly drifting westward here in time. And this is also something that has a broad turning motion with it, and some thunderstorms are clustered around it. It has a much more favorable environment right now. And it looks as though that's going to be tracking to the northwest, and it has a strong chance to develop as well. There are some problems with it, though. One is that it's kind of surrounded by dry air, which is an inhibiting factor, but also there's some wind shear that's out ahead of it. Looking at the University of Wisconsin shear graphic here, this is our feature of interest right here. There's not much shear over it at the moment, but the area it's moving into does have some shear. It's 30 to 40 knots in the core of this little subtropical jet that's going across the Caribbean and parts of the tropical and subtropical Atlantic. So this has to move through a bit of a gauntlet here for a while, and that may continue to keep it in check for the short term. But less shear is ahead of it. We expect it's going to be out in here somewhere with this other green area north of the Lesser Antilles in a couple or 3 days. And when it gets there, it should meet favorable conditions. And there it's going to have a chance to develop. So the question is where it likely goes from there. And you can see where they're showing it's going to go. It looks like it's going to go to the northwest and around 4 or 5 days from now, start to recurve, assuming it does develop in time as we expect it will. Bermuda is going to have to keep an eye on this. Looks like it's going to, assuming it does develop on schedule, recurve before it can get to the East Coast, though. So it's not going to be a direct problem for North and South Carolina unless you might have a beach trip planned next weekend, in which case this potential tropical storm, maybe even hurricane that'll be several hundred miles away, will be churning up the Atlantic and sending some swells into the Carolina coastal areas that will cause rough surf and rough current risk and rough seas too if you plan to be out on the ocean. So that's something to keep in mind as we go through the next several days. And just these three we're watching, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to be worrying about more stuff down the road. Whoops, clicked on the wrong thing. There is another tropical wave that's about to emerge from West Africa. You can see a little turning motion here over the Ivory Coast and some thunderstorms associated with that. That'll come off into the Atlantic in a couple more days, and that's probably going to be something to keep an eye on too.
Thanks, Frank. And this is a good reminder for folks, if you're listening on the audio podcast feed, as we say from time to time, we love you. If you're looking for the visuals on what Frank just described or any other part of our show, you can click the YouTube link in the description. Or this is kind of a cool feature. If you're listening on Spotify, you can actually just swipe on over to the app and watch portions of our episode on video. You can sync between that audio in the background and that video as you need be, depending on what you're doing. Please drive safely if that's what you're doing. Don't try to watch Frank. He'll be here when you're done driving. Frank, it is that time of year where storms can kind of, as you were showing us in that outlook from the Hurricane Center, do kind of make that hook up along the coast if possible, right? Isn't that one of the routes, if you will, that we see this time of year?
Indeed it is. Oftentimes, once you get to this time of year, you see the upper level troughs, southward dips in the jet stream coming into the eastern part of the country as the weather's cooling off. The jet stream starts to sink farther south, and oftentimes that's how we get our near misses, is we have those troughs that dig in, as we're kind of seeing now over the eastern part of the country, and steer those tropical systems through the alley between the Carolina coast and Bermuda, or out toward Bermuda, or even farther out to sea, depending upon the position of that trough. Or sometimes the trough's far enough west that those hurricanes come right up into the East Coast somewhere, and that's when we're in trouble.
I think it'll be very interesting to see, if we don't get Artemis off the ground this weekend, what that means for future launch attempts with the peak of the hurricane season. Will they have to roll it back, get it off the pad and away from storms? I mean, it's a possibility. It's all too early to really know at this point.
No, indeed, if there's a hurricane heading toward the Space Coast, then yes, they'll have to take protective actions and move that rocket into a place that's safe. But hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully we keep those things away. Hopefully the things stay quiet. But for what it's worth, I actually think there's a decent chance we get the launch off on Saturday. It's no guarantee, of course. It is Florida in early September, but I think there's a shot. And if you want to go back to my screen share, I'll show you why.
Right on cue.
All right, here's the GFS, and that's actually Friday afternoon here. So let's zip that forward a couple of notches here and go to Saturday morning. At this point, we have high pressure that's up here somewhere over the coastal part of the northeastern states. Flow around that comes out of the east. So we're going to have an easterly flow coming into Florida. That means your sea breeze triggered thunderstorms start along the east coast and relatively early in the day. Not only do we have that surface flow going on out of the east, but it's going on that's about 5,000 feet. So easterly flow there, 2,500 feet. There it is. As a matter of fact, you can see that little bit of convergence going on there.
What time is that approximately?
Go up to 10,000 feet, and you got the easterly flow going on there as well. So you're pushing east winds through a pretty deep layer in the atmosphere there. You're going to see some shower activity coming in, no doubt, but they're probably light and spotty, and the more robust thunderstorms that could cause problems in the afternoon, hopefully they'll be over the middle and west part of the peninsula by the time you get to that launch window at 2 p.m.
I got you. Okay, so let me see if I'm following this correctly. We're hoping that it'll push enough of that thunderstorm activity inland enough that by the time they get to that 2:17 launch window, they might be good on the coast.
That's what we hope for. Now, I think there'll be a stray shower or two around. Hopefully, not a deep enough or robust enough shower that causes a problem for the launch. Like I said, I think that'll be around. There'll be some concerns with clouds and the other parameters for the launch too. But my gut feeling is that those thunderstorms will be off to the west. At least that's the way it looks right now.
Well, it'll certainly give us something to watch during the 2-hour-long launch window. In addition to what's happening with the mechanics, we keep our close eye on the radar. And it sounds like with Monday's previous launch attempt, if it wasn't for the mechanical issue, by the time they kind of got around to it, it was going to be precipitation. That was going to be their problem. So we will watch that. 2:17 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday is the next launch attempt as of this Wednesday night. And I guess we'll wait to see if there are any changes to that. They I think are optimistic that they've got their engines in order. Before we go tonight, Scotty Powell has been looking back at this summer. Kids have gone back to school. Labor Day is upon us. August ends in hours from now. And I hate to tell this to folks, summer's about gone here if you're a meteorologist. Right, Scotty?
That's right. Meteorological summer ends at 11:59. So gosh, what is that? Less than 3 hours from now. So one thing I want to jump on with Frank, he was talking about the tropics. I saw this stat earlier and I had to scroll back through Twitter to find it. But this is the first time since 1997 that we did not have a named tropical system the month of August. So
pretty impressive. That doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's pretty historic. That's over 20, what is that? 20, I'm doing math off the top of my head, 24 years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, pretty significant there.
25 years.
25. Yeah. So pretty significant there that we've not had anything develop. And, we were coming into this year thinking that, and by no means is this year over, but we were kind of coming in thinking, man, this could be another heavy hitting tropical season, but knock on wood, it's been fairly tame so far. We'll hope to keep it that way. So,
I mean, just looking at my calendar, September, which lies ahead of us, has been the historic home of the peak of hurricane season. And just to drop that point home, Hugo, 1989 was September. Florence in 2018 was September. And then even into October, right? Matthew in 2017, Hazel, those were October storms. So,
and that 2015, I know Joaquin didn't hit the Carolinas, but it influenced that fire hose of moisture into Charleston and then up into Columbia and Myrtle Beach. So around here, we once we get through the month of October, you can kind of start to take that deep breath. I mean, November's still in that hurricane season, but at least by then, the number or named storms that affect the Carolinas kind of lessened. So we'll hope that this calm trend continues, but it's going to be another month or so before we can get out of the woods. So, James, you were talking about fall, so I'm going to screen share here. Thanks to our good friends at the Southeast Climate Center. They always put together a great product here. And this is looking back over from June 1st of 2022 all the way to August 30th. And besides, I think there was a little bit of rain maybe down in Charleston. So not all of the data is in for today, but this is through yesterday, from June 1st through yesterday. This is kind of an accumulation map of precipitation that has fallen in the Carolinas over the last 3 months or so here for summer. And one thing of interest that really pops off to me, James, we were talking about Charlotte clocking in at 9.29 inches of rain. But if you go up 45 minutes north of you guys, Hickory almost 20 inches of rain for the month for the 3 months of summer. So that was the first whoa, that's interesting. But
at least for here, Charlotte, the water comes downstream, so at least
that's right. Yeah, you get some of the effects. But you can look along the Carolina coast, south of the Outer Banks. Outer Banks only coming in with 12.45, but get down to Morehead City, Wilmington, Myrtle Beach, down into Charleston, Hilton Head, a good 20 inches or so.
You see Anderson, South Carolina?
Yeah, Anderson. 5.42. And then you go up here to the Highlands, which is one of the wettest spots in the eastern part, 23 inches. But yeah, 5.42 there in Anderson. We can kind of zoom in here. GSP area, anywhere between 8 to 11 inches of rain. Also up into the Raleigh area. This is where that drought had kind of lingered throughout the first part of summer, at least. Still about 10 to 12 inches of rain. So it's still kind of dry up there, but that's kind of a look at the rainfall. We can go over here and look at temperatures, and we'll go to this maximum temperatures. I'm sorry, not max. Mean is what I meant. Mean temperatures. You can kind of see about 80 degrees for the month or for summertime.
Really?
And we can look at that and look at the percentage or departure from normal. You can see it's about a 1 degree to 2 degree warmer than normal for the interior parts of the Carolinas. And then you get here along the coastline and it's about even through all of that. And that makes this the 10th warmest summer for Charlotte, 11th warmest summer in Hickory. But look down here in Greenville, Spartanburg, 3rd and 4th warmest summer for our friends down there in the upstate. Wilmington clocking in a top 5 summer. Raleigh clocking in at top 3 warmest summer. So a lot of people have been saying, man, it's been hot out there. And so the numbers, now that you can kind of get that perspective in as we're closing out summertime, the numbers are showing it was a pretty warm summer for a lot of our friends here in Eastern North Carolina and the upstate of South Carolina. So it's just a neat tool. You guys can view this anytime. You've just put Southeast Regional Climate Center into Google, and you can look up all these cool stats. So I always like looking at this as we kind of average out or end out the end of a season, and it kind of gives you a better idea of what the weather looked like. So
and I realize we probably should define why we are saying goodbye to summer. It's not just that we're leaning into pumpkin spice lattes early.
That's right. Yeah.
It's because to be consistent, meteorologically, summer ends the end of August, regardless of where astronomically it may fall on September 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd.
Yeah, there's there's almost a 20-day spread in all of these. So if you look at meteorological winter, that encompasses December, January, February. Then your spring is March, April, May. Summer is June, July, August. And then fall is September, October, and November for meteorological. Your meteorological seasons, your astronomical seasons are, like you said, the 20th or 21st, 22nd of those months too. So it's just a little bit off. But it's been a hot and somewhat wet summer, depending on where you live. But I know a lot of folks love fall, and they really love that time that we start to cool off. But as we three know, you don't really get fall here in the Carolinas until mid-October. You're still yeah, you're still hot in the month of September. The first couple of weeks of October is warm, and then you finally get those consecutive cold fronts to move in, and it finally starts to cool off some. But if you like hot weather or warm weather, you still got about another 4 or 5 weeks before you have to start worrying about some of the cooler temperatures.
It was only a few years ago when we had 100-degree heat down here in Columbia in early October.
You're right. Yeah, it's funny. I was looking back over some stuff. I think it's 2019. It was in the mid to upper 90s in Charlotte, in all of Western North Carolina, the first week of October. And then we finally started to cool down. So, yeah, like Frank said, we still got another 4 or 5 weeks of temperatures in the 80s. I wouldn't rule out more 90s. Before things really start to cool off in October. So,
well, my front lawn thinks it's fall because take a look at the amount of leaves in this photo that have already fallen. And I walked out the door and I was like, I guess it's fall now.
It's so funny when we got back from Florida, the same thing happened here, and asked the neighbors, was there a storm or something? They're like, no, just the leaves started falling. So yeah, it's funny that's happened. I've actually seen a few yellow leaves as well. So yeah, it's Mother Nature trying to tell you, hey, there's change on the way. So start to get used to it. The biggest change I think we've all noticed, I think, is the sunset is now before 8 o'clock. I mean, it seems like just a month ago it was 9 o'clock and you could still have that dusk, but now about 8:30, that it's completely dark outside. And that's another sign of that fall's on its way. So,
well, Evan Fisher put this together in the years past, and Brad Penovich at WCNC tweeted it yesterday. The average peak fall colors. This is not a forecast for this year. Just want to get that straight. Like, if you want to book a hotel room, that's on you. But you can see, of course, it normally starts in the mountains earlier in mid to late October, and then rolls down through the foothills into the Piedmont as we make our way closer to the start of November. So whether it'll play out this year, given temperatures and rainfall and all of those good things, too early to say. Although I did see somebody tweet at Brad the other day to ask for a winter snowfall forecast, and that is definitely too early.
Way too early. Way too early.
Well, actually, to be fair, we could probably say this. It's going to snow north of 85 and not snow south of 85.
I know that 85 is your dividing line. If you live north, you may be happy. If you live south, you may not be happy. But one thing I wanted to touch up on, James, before we end, you probably, if you follow us on Twitter, probably seen us tweet this out earlier. And Frank, you may have some to add to this, but 136 years ago today, a magnitude 7.3 earthquake occurred in Charleston, South Carolina, considered the most powerful earthquake in the eastern United States after the largest Mississippi earthquake of 1811 and 1812. So back on 136 years ago, largest earthquake there in Charleston. And Frank, you can attest to, I'm not sure if you felt the
whoa. Frank was not around 136 years ago.
Just
to be clear.
I'm old, but ain't that old, yo.
he can attest to seems like earthquake central down there in the Columbia area. I mean, it's got to the point where there's an earthquake advisory, I think that was issued or whatever. Yeah. In fact, we're trying to get some folks on the show to talk about that, but it kind of ties in with the recent earthquake activity in Columbia. Just shows you that there could be some big earthquakes. Thankfully, the last big one was 136 years ago. Hopefully we don't have to worry about that anymore, but
yeah, right. And really the only one.
Yeah. And it just shows that
magnitude.
We're in that earthquake fault zone area that, we see a lot of smaller quakes, and hopefully we'll never see a 7.3.
Right. And, this is kind of hard to believe, but I went and checked this one time. The 7.3 earthquake that happened in Charleston, if it happened in California, it'd be in the top 10 for them.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Right. It's something to think about. If we can have a big earthquake. Now, we have no idea what the return period is because it's happened once in our recorded history, which is 400 years. roughly. So that's but does it happen once every 100 years and we're just been lucky? Does it happen once every 400 or 500 years and we're due? Does it happen once every 1,000 or 10,000 years and we don't have to worry about it for a while? Probably. Again, or a better way of putting it is the odds are really low of it happening anytime soon. If the return period is once every 10,000 years, but we just don't really know. So that's why it's best to stay prepared. We get these little rumblers every now and then, and a big one is not unheard of. So it's best that you are prepared for disasters in general, and that you know what to do in the event that there is a big earthquake. I mean, they happened in North Carolina too, Scotty. You remember it hasn't been that long ago when there was a magnitude 5 earthquake.
About 2
Jefferson or something, right?
Yeah, about 2. I think it was about 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago, James?
It was after the pandemic started.
Yeah, it was 2020 up in Sparta, 5.3, I believe.
Something like
that.
It
was a 5 something, maybe 5.3, maybe a little bit.
I got it right here. It was a 5.1, at least according to our initial report.
Yeah. So yeah, and what was it up in Virginia? Jared's talked about
that was a 5.6, I think.
Yeah. So
I was living in State College. It shook for like 15 seconds in State College with that.
So the East Coast is I don't want to say vulnerable, but East Coast is very prone to seeing some earthquakes from time to time.
And Frank mentioned the West Coast, right? So it's not all things are created equal. A lower magnitude earthquake could actually be felt more significantly here on the East Coast than the West Coast, if I recall my earthquake knowledge correctly, because of the way our plates are set up.
Different.
Yeah,
it was because the soil type is different. Out in California, it's much more rocky, and it doesn't transmit the earthquake shaking as well as our soft soils. That being said, over in the Middle Mississippi Valley, where they had the New Madrid Fault earthquakes years ago, their soil type over there transmits the earthquake waves quite well. So if they had a big earthquake like that, which they've had before, and certainly can happen again, then we'd probably feel that here.
A few minutes ago, Scotty mentioned the earthquake advisory that was put out for South Carolina from the USGS following all of these earthquakes emanating largely from the Elgin, South Carolina area. And I just learned a new word reading this advisory. Earthquake swarm refers to a prolonged sequence of earthquakes that lacks any clear primary event or main shock, right? Because there's been concern that these are foreshocks to something to come. And the USGS is saying, no, it seems just to be a swarm. As we've been talking about, earthquakes can happen in the Carolinas, although it's unusual that they're happening in this frequency. The largest that we've seen since December 27th, 2021, when this all began, was a 3.6 magnitude earthquake, which happened on June 29th. We've also mentioned some of the other earthquakes, the Charleston one obviously being the largest, but some other big ones over the last 100 years or so included in 1913 in Union County, North Carolina, a magnitude 5.5 earthquake. At least I think that's North Carolina. It could have been South Carolina, but I seem to recall that being North Carolina, as Frank goes to fact check me because this doesn't specify. That quake caused damage to bricks and stone buildings, destroyed chimneys, and destroyed furniture and homes. The most damaging earthquake, as we mentioned, in South Carolina history was that magnitude 7.0 earthquake in 1886 in Charleston. Maybe this was Union County, South Carolina, since this whole paragraph seems to be about South Carolina. But that's another call of what we have seen historically earthquake-wise in the Carolinas.
Right. Yeah, there was another one over, if I recall correctly, Aiken County that was a 4 point something about 20 years ago. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah. Well, we will keep a close eye on the rumblings. We will keep a close eye on the tropics. We will keep a close eye on Artemis. Subscribe to our YouTube channel or our audio podcast feed, wherever it is you'd like to connect with us. We've been uploading audio extras as NASA's been providing updates on the launch. So you can watch those on our YouTube channel, or you can listen to the audio, listen to those teleconferences. All over. We are science nerds at heart, and there's so much weather that goes into these launches that we just can't take our eyes off of it. Frank and Scotty, it's always good to see you guys, and happy meteorological fall.
Yeah, have a great Labor Day, y'all. Be safe.
We'll talk to you again.
Doesn't start for another month here.
Talk to you again real soon from the Carolina Weather Group.